Okay, so this video is about chromatography. Chromatography is literally separation by solubility. So how does it work? Well, what you have is a solid state substance, so usually something like filter paper or actually chromatography paper. And what this is it's absorbent. It's absorbent, so then when you put that into the solvent, it will draw the solvent up the paper. The solvent which solvent you use will depend on what you're trying to separate. So in the case of the photosynthetic pigments, the solvent that we use is propanone. But if, for example, you were just separating the pigments in ink, then you would simply use water. So what you do is you take your chromatography paper and using a pencil, you draw a line on the, about a couple of centimeters from the bottom of the paper. And then you drop repeated drops of whatever it is that you're trying to separate onto that line. Then what you do is you dip the filter paper into the solvent, making sure that the solvent does not touch the line or touch the dot. What will happen is that the solvent will start to move up the paper. As it moves up the paper, it will come through the substances that you're trying to separate, and then it will carry those substances up the paper, and they will stop moving at different points depending on their solubility in the solvent. So what you can see here is that, the solvent has come up to the top here, and it has separated out that initial dot into 4 different lines, and each of those lines would represent a different pigment. And what we find is that the different pigments will essentially move the same amount because they will show the same degree of solubility. The way that you can put a number to that is by calculating something called the RF value, which technically stands for the retardation factor, which is the distance the pigment travels divided by the distance that the solvent travels. So that's another reason for drawing your pencil line on your piece of paper. So what you do is you would measure from the pencil line to the pigment front, and then from the pencil line to the solvent front, and then you divide those two numbers by each other to get the RF value, which you can then use to identify your substance, because the RF value of any substance should always be the same.